is Anarchast.
Hola humanos, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I'm here with Skinner Layne. He's lived in Chile for about 5 years. We're on a rooftop of his office here, Exosphere, which we'll talk about, which sounds really exciting. I don't know a lot about it, so I'm going to learn along with you. And but of course, the very first question I always ask every first guest is, how did you become an anarchist?
Well, for me, it was a relatively short path from starting to read Hayek at the age of 14 to being active in Republican Party politics and deciding that that wasn't exactly leading me in a direction that I thought was consistent with the ideas that I had been developing. And then with the Iraq War, I think, is what finally pushed me into full-blown anarchism. I saw no way to justify maintaining an institution that could perpetuate such an evil. Yeah,
do you catch on to that right off the bat? The first one or the second one? They've attacked Iraq or occupied it for so long now.
Yes, well, in 2003, I guess, when
the second one,
the first, or yes, I was a bit too young for the first one, but
that one sucked too. It was the same BS. So that's interesting. So, did you go to school in the U.S.?
Yeah, I went through a traditional public school, middle-class American education. Went to the University of Arkansas, studied economics and philosophy, and then became an entrepreneur rather than going to law school, which was the original plan.
Good idea.
Yes, so, best decision I ever made. Yeah, not going to law school.
Yeah, me too. Ever since I never actually really went to school, but I sort of quit the corporate world. I was working at a bank, and I just decided I'm going to start my own business. It was definitely the best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
So, when you first came down to Chile, there was what were you doing? What did you have in mind?
Well, I sort of decided before, or in late 2006, early 2007, when the inverted yield curve appeared in the bond market in the States, that I was going to get out. And it took me a little while to close down everything that I was doing in the States and get out of my first startup. And I moved here about 6 or 7 months before Lehman Brothers crashed. And so when I got here, I didn't speak a word of Spanish. I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I was at least not in the States. So I was pretty happy with that decision.
What made you choose Chile?
Well, I picked Chile for all the sort of macroeconomic reasons that now are very well known, but at the time took a bit of research.
Yeah. You caught on early.
Yeah, the very low debt to GDP ratio was one of the key factors, not just in the public sector, but also in the private sector. Chile has one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios in the private sector in the world. The banks are very well capitalized. The large corporations here are extremely solvent, and so those factors sort of portend stability, if not necessarily opportunity, but at least stability, which at the time was my main concern. And then, of course, the factors of economic freedom, the favorable weather, all those kind of things. So I moved here having never visited the country.
Wow. And you came by yourself?
Well, I actually moved here with my my life partner at the time. Cool. And our dogs.
And your dogs? How many?
2.
Yeah, I got 4. It's hard to move around.
Yeah.
So, have you seen a lot of changes in Chile in the last 5 years?
Yeah, Chile has developed relatively quickly in a couple of key ways. When I moved here, there was absolutely no discussion of entrepreneurship. There was no tech scene. There was no startup scene. Nobody was talking about any of those things. And the people that were sort of, like the French kind of weird people that had spent time in the States and came back here, and nobody was listening to them. And then Startup Chile came along a couple of years ago, and that started to energize the conversation around entrepreneurship. Still, I think the entrepreneurial ecosystem here is still very much in its infancy. There's not a culture of entrepreneurship here. and the system itself is really designed not to encourage or even to discourage entrepreneurship.
Really?
So there are a lot of barriers in Chile that a lot of the people that are talking about Chile externally are talking about the good parts, but having lived here for 5 years continuously, I see all the things that don't quite work as they need to in order for that to change. And most of them are cultural problems, but there are definitely institutional problems in the bureaucracy that, it may on paper seem like there's less bureaucracy here, but that, like, when you have to go spend days at a time in the notary getting stamps, you don't feel like it's less bureaucracy.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, they still have, it's weird because there is a lot of general freedom here compared to the U.S., but at the same time, like you just said, there's all these little, we were just trying to recharge my cell phone, and you need a root number, which is basically a socialist insecurity number, and I just typed in 9, I don't want to tell you because I don't want you to steal my identity in Chile, but it's a lot of 9s in it, and it worked, but it's kind of weird that way. I think they still have a little bit of that communist sort of style, that bureaucracy style.
Well, it's just the classic Latin system. All of the, going, if you look at the structure of economies in Latin Europe, as well as in Latin America, you have this over-reliance on the civil law system as opposed to the common law system. So English common law countries don't have a lot of the absurd bureaucracy that civil law countries have, because in order for anything to be an official document, it has to be stamped by somebody. So you and I can't have a handshake agreement on anything and it be recognized by the courts. Whereas verbal contracts in common law countries are actually considered to be valid. So the legal infrastructure, and if you look at a country, like Hong Kong, for example, one of its successes is that it adopted the English common law infrastructure. So what I normally tell people that are thinking about coming to Chile, because I like to be very honest with them, is that if you're coming from the States or Europe, you trade a few gigantic, insurmountable headaches for 1,000 little headaches. And that's the trade-off.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We've been down here doing Gulf Coast Chile, and we've been seeing that it's been going slow because of a lot of bureaucracy and spending hours in notaries, getting things stamped. But you started Exosphere, so you're very into entrepreneurialism, and you're trying to get it really rolling down here. Why don't you tell people all about that?
Sure. Exosphere is an alternative education platform that is really fundamentally what we are, is a problem-solving community. We want to help people solve their individual problems in their quest to become self-reliant, so that they are empowered to help solve the world's problems through entrepreneurship.
Wow. And so you just started that recently?
Yeah, we've been working on it since March of 2012. We finally opened our facility here in February of this year, and we're launching our first boot camp, entrepreneurship boot camp, in September. Applications are still open. If you are interested in an 11-week adventure in Chile, learning to become self-reliant, coding, design, sales, and marketing, this is the place to come and do it, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, I've heard about it from a few people, so it definitely seems to be getting out there. Have you had a good response so far?
Yeah, we've filled almost all of our spots for the program, so there are just a few left. And considering that we launched the marketing about 4 weeks ago, we're pretty happy that it's filled up so quickly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. A great shows there's a need for it. There's a market for it.
Yeah, I think that the startup industry in the States and the mentality that goes along with startup culture is really lacking in an individual focus. A lot of people are 2 or 3 or 4 steps before doing a startup. They haven't gone through all of the self-reflection, the internal examination process that's really essential to being a successful entrepreneur, because there is you have to be really committed to the path, because it's not easy, and the early stages especially are extraordinarily difficult. So what we want to do is give people a place to start, and our tagline is "Begin Here." For that reason, we want to provide a context for people to pursue a path toward independence and self-reliance, where they are mutually supported by other people engaged in the same struggle.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur, and I can definitely agree with you. It's not easy. If you're not willing to put up with massive amounts of fear and possible failure, I always say, I've started many businesses, and I always say if it hasn't almost failed 2 or 3 times, you're not doing it right.
Yes, it's true. And I think that the persistence required and the willingness to do whatever it takes, even if it is standing in the notary for 3 days or whatever, that those skills, those personal development skills, which used to, I think, be embedded in the American character, have disappeared.
Yeah.
And so helping people get that back, I think, that's the foundation of of having a future that is driven by entrepreneurs, rather than a world where we just sort of react to whatever's handed to us.
Yeah, and so many people feel so much more comfortable just getting a paycheck, but a lot of them work for things like the U.S. government getting a paycheck, and they kind of assume they're going to continue to get that paycheck for decades.
Yes.
And so the apparent risk isn't right in front of them. They don't actually realize, but it's almost just as risky, a lot of this.
Sure, yeah, what people don't see is the tail risk, as Nassim Taleb describes it. The tail risk of the collapse of a government or a corporation or whatever it is. And definitely the monthly paycheck is a horrendous modern addiction.
It can be enticing, though. I've thought about that a few times the last few years. It's like it's getting so hard sometimes. Dealing with business. Like I'd almost just rather work for somebody. Just even for a few months, because it's not easy. But however, it's very fulfilling at the same time.
It is. With suffering comes joy, if it's the right kind of suffering.
Yeah, definitely. And you have all those highs and lows. It's almost, I don't know, maybe, definitely entrepreneurialism I don't think is for everyone. Would you agree generally with that?
Well, I don't think that everyone is ready for it.
Right.
But I think everybody could be ready for it. I think that it's a path that requires people to be at a certain level of personal growth. And I think everybody, with the exception of maybe a few people that are physically or mentally not capable of it, but I think that the vast majority of people are, and I think that only through driving entrepreneurship can we ever have a world where people don't feel dependence on any other institution. So a lot of times people ask me what my political views are, and I now just say entrepreneurship, because I think that entrepreneurship is the only political alternative to the state.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because a lot of people think that I need a job, or they keep talking about jobs, and there is a role for that. Like if you're a younger person and you need some capital, yeah, you go and work for somebody. But I've always considered myself to be a private contractor. Mm-hmm. I don't like that word employee, right. And I don't even call anyone who works with our companies employees. Right. They work with me, right. And we're all individual, and their boss basically is our customers. Right. And so to get in that mindset of I'm an employee, and then you get into that whole Marxist sort of mindset of the working class. I don't think there's any such thing as a working class. We all need to do things to survive, but there's no class of workers.
Well, there is the working class, but it's a mentality.
Right.
It's an artificial construction.
And it's a dangerous
that people have either imposed on themselves or they've been imposed on by external political propaganda.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a dangerous mentality. You start to think of it that way, and I hear it all the time. Oh, we have to, the working class is being taken advantage of. If it was a voluntary transaction, if you go and work at McDonald's, this is happening in the U.S. right now, of course. If you go and work there voluntarily, McDonald's is not taking advantage of you. Right. You've agreed to a certain amount for a certain thing you're going to do. Right. But of course, in the U.S., and this is where people get really confused, I think, because of the inflation and all the government regulations, it's making it harder and harder for the people who aren't making as much money to survive. So they actually went on strike recently, and they're blaming it on McDonald's. They're missing the actual problem is this Federal Reserve and the government have been destroying the economy.
Yeah, I think that the real answer to the wage crisis is actually encouraging people to leave the labor market and become entrepreneurs. The more people that do that, it will drive up wages for existing corporate frameworks. And
it creates wealth.
Right, I think that the evisceration of entrepreneurship in countries that are hard hit, like Venezuela, for example, it's a perpetuating problem,
Yeah.
and one that the U.S. could run into if it continues down the present path.
Oh, definitely. It's already heading down that road.
I don't think that means that entrepreneurs in the States are going to stop being entrepreneurs. I think they're just going to start being entrepreneurs someplace else.
Yeah, I agree. So a great place to start is with you, with the Exosphere. Why don't you tell people where they can find out more about it?
Yes, you can find us on the web at Exosphere, which we have the clever URL that is very difficult to say, but it's exosphe.re.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the links down below in case you couldn't figure it out. If you went to public school, it's difficult, I know. So that's it for Anarchast from a sunny winter day in Santiago. And thanks for joining us. And remember, Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.